All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to see how the story of one small imaginary village can actually unlock the massive, complex forces that shape our entire economy. So, let's just jump right in. The big question we're asking today is pretty simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. How can one single made-up village teach us real-world truths about production, wealth, poverty, and, the very engine of our economic lives? Let's find out. So, our story begins in a little village called Palampur. Now, before you ask, no, Palampur isn't a real place you can find on a map. But, and this is the important part, it's built on real research from rural India. It's designed to be a perfect small-scale model of a developing economy. You can think of it as our own little economic laboratory. So picture this. Palampur has about 450 families, and for most of them, like 3/4 of the village, farming is their whole life. But here's the catch, and it's a big one right from the start. The land isn't divided up equally, not even close. A small group of 80 upper caste families owns most of the land, while about a third of the families, mostly Dalits, are completely landless. This single fact sets the stage for everything else that happens here.
Okay, so if you want to understand how Palampur works, or really how any economy works, you've got to look under the hood. You have to see what makes the engine run. And that engine, production, it runs on 4 absolutely essential ingredients. Economists call them the factors of production.
All right, first up, land. And when we say land, we're not just talking about dirt. It's the whole package. The water in the rivers, the trees in the forest, the minerals in the ground, all the gifts from nature. The key thing here, especially in Palampur, is that the amount of farmland is fixed. You can't just snap your fingers and make more of it, which makes it an incredibly precious, limited resource.
Next, you need labor. This one's pretty straightforward, right? This is the people power. It's the physical work of a farmer in the field, for sure, but it's also the brain power of an engineer designing a new irrigation system. It's all the human effort that goes into turning resources into something useful.
Ingredient number 3 is what we call physical capital. And this one comes in 2 flavors. First, you've got fixed capital. Think of this as the heavy-duty stuff that sticks around. Tractors, tools, buildings. Then you've got working capital. This is the stuff you use up along the way, like seeds, fertilizer, and of course the cold, hard cash you need to buy it all.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Capital isn't just about having stuff, it's about being able to get it. Let's look at 2 people from our village. First, there's Savita, a small farmer. She just needs 3,000 rupees for seeds and things, but to get it, she has to go to Tejpal Singh, a big landowner. And get this, he charges her a brutal 24% interest rate and makes her promise to work on his farm for super low wages just to get the loan. Now look at Tejpal. He has so much extra wheat. We're talking 350 quintals, that's like 35,000 kilograms, that he's got savings just sitting there. He uses that money to lend to people like Savita and buy himself brand new tractors. You can see right there how the cycle of wealth and the cycle of debt work.
And those 2 stories, Savita's and Tejpal's, they bring us to our 4th and final ingredient. And you could argue this is the most important one of all. It's the secret sauce that makes everything else work: human capital.
So what does human capital look like in real life? Well, let's follow 2 friends, Sakal and Vilas. Sakal's parents really scraped together everything they had to invest in his education. He ends up studying computers, lands a great job, and even gets promoted for creating new software. It's what you'd call a virtuous cycle. The investment in him keeps paying off. But his friend Vilas, his story's totally different. He never got an education, his health wasn't great, and he ends up stuck doing the same low-paying work his mom did. That's a vicious cycle. Same village, same starting line, but that one difference, investment in human capital, sent them on 2 completely different paths.
And that really is the main takeaway here, isn't it? You can have all the land and all the tractors in the world, but they're just stuff. They can't do a thing by themselves. It's the people, their knowledge, their skills, their health. That's the human capital that actually turns those resources into something valuable.
Okay, so we've seen the 4 things that make the economic engine run. But what happens when someone can't get access to that fuel? The land, the capital, the education. Well, for them, the engine just sputters and dies. And the result of that is poverty.
Let's put a face to this. This is Ram Saran. He lives in the city, and he's got a job at a flour mill, but he's a daily wage laborer. That means some days he might not get work, and even when he does, the pay is so low it's rarely enough to support his family of 6. His wife has to work as a cleaner, his son works at a tea stall. They're all just trying to scrape by, every single day.
Now let's head back to the countryside and meet Lakha Singh. He doesn't own any land, so he has to take whatever odd jobs he can find on the big farms. But the work isn't steady, and neither is the money. His family of 6 often struggles to even get 2 meals a day. And the story gets even tougher. His own father passed away simply because they just couldn't afford to buy medicine for him.
Now, these stories of Ram and Lakha, they're heartbreaking, but they are not just random occurrences. They're part of a much bigger pattern, and the data proves it. Poverty hits certain groups way harder than others. Look at this. For India's indigenous scheduled tribes, a shocking 43 out of every 100 people live in poverty. For rural farm workers, it's 34 out of 100. These aren't just numbers. They show a systemic problem where your background can dramatically increase your chances of being poor.
So when you see problems this big and this systemic, what can be done? How does a society try to catch the people who are falling? Well, one of the most basic things you can do is create a safety net for food.
In India, they have a massive system for this, and it basically works in 3 simple steps. Step 1, the government buys extra grain from farmers at a guaranteed price, called a minimum support price. Step 2, all that grain gets stored in these huge national stockpiles called a buffer stock. And finally, Step 3, that grain is then sent out all over the country to special ration shops through something called the Public Distribution System, or PDS.
Okay, that sounds like a big, complicated government program, but what does it actually mean for a real person? Well, meet Ahmad. He's a rickshaw puller, so his daily earnings are all over the place. But he has a special card, a PDS card, that shows he's below the poverty line. With that card, he can go to a ration shop and buy essentials like rice and wheat for half of what they'd cost in the regular market. For him and his family, that system isn't just a policy. It's the difference between eating and going hungry.
All right, so we've traveled from the fields of our imaginary village, Palampur, all the way to a city ration shop. We've seen all these different pieces of the economy in action. So let's pull it all together now and see what we've learned.
So what are the big takeaways from our little village? First, you need all 4 ingredients to make things: land, labor, capital, and especially human capital. Second, and this is so important, when people don't have equal access to those ingredients, you get poverty. It's almost a direct result. Third, the absolute best investment a society can make is in its people, in their education and their health. That's what creates that virtuous cycle we talked about. And finally, you need systems. You need safety nets like food security to protect the most vulnerable when the market just doesn't.
So that leaves us with one final question, and this one's for you to think about. If a village really is just a tiny version of our whole economy, and you had the chance to make just one single investment to guarantee its future prosperity, where would you put the money? After everything we've talked about today, what do you think is the most valuable resource of all?